Hello and welcome to In Remembrance, a collective storytelling event to talk about our collective grief and trauma that has happened as a result of COVID-19. My name is Ezra. I will be your host this evening. As you can see, I have my notes and my laptop in front of me. Typically when it comes to events, we like to memorize or prepare ahead of time, but I'm going to break collective norms of professionalism and just roll with what I have, recognizing the limitation of the energy that I have in this space. So I'm giving myself that permission just in case if you are curious. Today we'll be discussing subjects related to mental health and overall well-being, so please be sure to engage with this material if you are in a space ready to reflect on this past year. Please have a pen and paper in front of you because later in the program we'll be having some prompted reflections. Before we begin, here's a quick disclaimer. In remembrance from Capital City Pride, this event and the following discussion is not a professional counseling session. This is a one-time event that is not a substitute for a relationship with a therapist. If you have concerns for your well-being or the well-being of someone else, please seek out professional advice from a medical or mental health professional. A good place to start in seeking help are the resources provided on this event, the Iowa Psychological Association's website for finding a therapist near you, the American Psychological Association's comprehensive guide to finding resources in your state, and Psychology Today. In Remembrance is an event that specifically invites folks into a space of grief to discuss things related to the global health pandemic as well as grieving the aspects of our life prior to COVID-19. As we invite folks into the space of discussing loss, we ask that you're responsible for yourself and for your emotional well-being. The order of events in this video includes the why behind the project, a conversation with Leslie Woodruss on the window of tolerance, a reflection period, and finally, a grounded meditation. In Remembrance started back in January. It was prompted off of thinking about how we were experiencing the loss of life at such a stark amount for one of the first times in our histories. I felt as if there was a certain dissonance in watching how we were moving forward in the world, despite seeing how many people were drastically affected by this event. There was always this push to return to a sense of normal, to return to our lives with no masks, with everything being open, and with access to the world yet again. Back in January, it was hard to conceptualize where we would be at this point in time, to figure out when we would be emerging back into our public spaces. The shutdown was only supposed to last for a week, only supposed to last for 3 weeks, a month, several months, and then well over into a year. It was very important for me to recognize that there were some folks who, however, did not get to experience a shutdown. There are some individuals who their job was considered essential, and so they did not get the experience of working from home and being in quarantine and being in shutdown. Some jobs stayed home, and some jobs have been in the space of working with COVID since exposure in March of 2020. Back in January, I could not imagine a place where we would be at this point in time, and there has been a lot of mixed messaging for folks, such as, I'm thriving, I'm miserable, none of my hobbies bring me joy, I just went on a walk, I love working from home. Working from home has destroyed my perception of my job. People are getting vaccinated. There are 3 new strands, so no one is vaccinated. Start going outdoors, start going to the bars, stay indoors, go outside, indoor seating, outdoor seating, 6 feet apart, the economy. And isn't it great we're finally getting back to normal? Normal. What is normal? There's a new normal that we have all established in our lives, but when have we taken the time to grieve what our old normal was? There's always been this conversation of returning to normal, but I have rarely seen the conversation to make space for how our previous normals, your life, and my life has been lost. COVID-19 has changed our lives across the globe and has brought with it a wave of collective trauma that in a lot of ways we are still getting swept up in. I don't want to speak to it as if it's over, because in many ways what we're seeing across the globe and how resources are being distributed is evident in the way that things are not as they used to be. We are not back to a sense of normal. Our lives have been drastically changed, and we've had to adapt to a lot of new things with very little prep time. That being said, there is a collective trauma that folks have experienced that we're going to be discussing here today. Today's space was cultivated with the intention to talk about COVID and how it has changed our lives. Within the mental health field, it can be hard to establish a standard definition of trauma or traumatic stress. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration brought together a group of academics and clinicians, and they decided on 3 key aspects of trauma, which are the event, the experience, and the effects. It's in the complexities of these 3 interrelated components that you can find trauma, which makes it very subjective, but no less true for the individual experiencing that trauma. In truth, I wish that we could have done this event in person. And there are limitations to showing up still in COVID-safe ways, with it being both inclusive and accessible to folks. So I want to acknowledge how draining of a year it has been. I want to acknowledge how draining it is to be on Zoom and Zoom fatigue and screens, to name the limitations of this event. I also want to say that you will get out of it what you give. Be here as much or as little as you want. I want to thank you ahead of time for your vulnerability and the space that you are giving yourself today. And now we're going to move to a conversation with my friend and therapist, Leslie Woodress. Hi, Leslie. Welcome on in.
Hello.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. Happy Thursday to you.
Yes, happy Thursday.
Yes. I suppose happy Saturday for when the video is actually released. So happy Saturday.
Yes, to everyone else, happy Saturday. We are living in the past presently because you're seeing it later. Yeah.
I'm seeing it later.
Yeah.
But it's still in good time. Still in good time. So today we're going to be talking about the window of tolerance.
Yes.
Something that is very near and dear to you and your practice.
It is. Yes, it is it's relying on the polyvagal theory, which I won't get into all the nitty gritty of that, but therapeutically really understanding how our brain functions under stress, and more so also under trauma, which is really what we've all been living in for the past year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, to get us started, can you just give us an overview of the window of tolerance and what it serves for you and your clients?
Yes. So like I said, the window of tolerance is really like a framework to understand how our brain works under stress. And so I think that it is a really great foundation place for me to start clinically with my clients, and also for those working with me to get an understanding of like, why, right? Why did I act that way? Why did I react that way? Why did I respond, or why did other people around me respond in that way? And I find myself at a loss, or I'm all of a sudden overwhelmed with everything that's going on around me. And it's a really great way to start to understand where our brain is functioning from, and also then how we can shift our brain space out of a survival functioning into our window of tolerance, which we'll learn more about here in just a little bit.
Because we've spoken about the window before, very much so visually like a window.
Yes.
But it has opportunities to both grow and shrink depending on life circumstances that are happening.
Yes, yes. So when we're under stress, and in my practice, I often refer to trauma as stress. It doesn't have to be a huge traumatic event. We can have ongoing life stressors, and it will process in our brain very much so similar to one big traumatic event. And so I tend to just refer to trauma as stress. And so when we are stressed, our window of tolerance shrinks, which makes it easier for us to become dysregulated and pushed outside, which we'll talk here more in just a moment. I have a graphic to help explain. But when we are dysregulated, that's when we are thrown into our survival brain, which is why a lot of us have likely been functioning in this space for the past year. And that really functionally, humans aren't designed to live their life in survival mode.
Because when we're living in survival mode, we have a dump of chemicals in our body, like ongoing. So like perhaps like what, cortisol or other...
Adrenaline is in there. Definitely other chemicals. Those are the big ones for sure. But living in survival mode, right, is then our brain is constantly under threat, right? Constantly in danger. And just imagine not only the strain that places on your brain and your emotions, your ability to think and focus, but it also puts strain on the rest of your body as well. Muscle tension, it impacts the way we digest food. It impacts our ability to sleep and our ability to find genuine rest. And so we are at higher risks for heart disease and other physical ailments when we are in a prolonged state living in survival mode. And so it's very, very beneficial for all of us as humans to understand, when am I in survival mode, right? When am I pushed outside of my window of tolerance? How do I get myself back in to my window of tolerance? And when we learn to do that, that is when our window grows. And that's when we start to have a more resilient mind, and we're able to self-soothe and regulate, and we're able to tolerate a lot more emotionally.
For sure. Would it be helpful for us to describe when someone is in survival mode?
Yes, it definitely would be. I'm actually going to pull up my graphic to help explain this. I don't know about everybody else, but I am a visual learner. So it is so, so helpful to be able to see, right, the actual window of tolerance and what's happening. So I am using kind of weather to help explain our window. Inside our window of tolerance is when we are inside the sun. And so we'll start talking about what that feels like, and then we'll journey on to understand what it feels like when we are pushed outside and we're dysregulated. So inside our sun, right, we're feeling real good, just like our sun here. This is when we're inside our window of tolerance, and within each space, within exploring this window of tolerance and understanding our brain function, it's kind of on a spectrum. And so within our window of tolerance, we go from a space of having a lot of energy, right? Being playful, cooperative. We want to engage, right? We want to connect with people. We're emotionally regulated, to also going down on the spectrum to be more relaxed, more calm. We might snuggle. We might just be more still in our body and in our mind, and wanting to find a place of just rest. Right? In this space, when we are in our window of tolerance, we are more aware of ourselves, what we need, how to express our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions to others. We are more aware of other people and what's going on with them. We're more aware of our environment and how we impact our environment. And we are more aware of kind of the time and things around us. And so it makes us just all around more present, more available, right. Which is just a really great place to be in. And when we have been pushed outside of our window, like we were saying earlier, our window gets smaller. And so it's harder for us to find time or be able to regulate ourselves to get back into our window. So some of the viewers may not have felt these feelings for a little while because we've been dysregulated.
Because of stress related to the global pandemic.
Yes, yes. And all that entails kind of along with it, right? In the global pandemic, we've had job loss. We've had loss of family members and friends, or not even being able, they may have been passing of those people, or just not being able to spend time with them because of COVID, right? Loss of events that we may have been planning or looking forward to, vacations or
milestones, graduations, weddings.
Yeah. Yes. So all of those things within the stress of the pandemic and the uncertainty and the news and not having a real clear idea of what's going on has pushed many of us outside of our window. And that's where we'll talk about next. So when we get pushed outside of our window, I'm going to start with going up when we are dysregulated. And this is called hyper-arousal. And this in our survival brain ends up appearing like fight or flight. And many people are familiar with this. And so I'm going to break it down a little bit further to help us understand how this actually might look in our day-to-day life. So in fight or flight, as we're getting pushed out of our window of tolerance, our brain becomes alert. And in this alert space, we might become more resistant, right? Resistant to change. I think about if you had the privilege, right? Not all people did during the pandemic, but if you had the privilege of all of a sudden working from home, that initial transition, many people became resistant to wanting to do that work at home. Or we might notice with our kids that they were resistant to going to online school, or even thinking about it now that the pandemic is people are starting to kind of go back out after the vaccines, and we're seeing the shift in wearing masks. People are maybe more resistant to returning maybe to work, or no longer working from home and going back into the office, right? So again, we're pushed into hyper-arousal. We might become more vigilant. And in this case, it's a result of our brain taking in more information than we normally would. So we might notice smaller things that our brain typically would have filtered out as non-essential information. So this would be, I'm very aware of my spouse's facial movements, the way they move their eyebrows or their tone of voice, or my coworker's tone of voice and what that means, or my perception of what it means.
Perceiving a threat in your environment, whether that be a close person in your life, coworker, and other individuals.
Yes. And so, right, again, this is a space of trying to keep ourselves safe because we're in survival mode. And so we are perceiving things as possibly dangerous.
Right.
How
do I know when I am in a state of hyper-arousal, perhaps, versus when I'm maybe just annoyed with someone?
I would encourage you to think about, right, like if I am annoyed, right, and I'm irritated with someone, is this an irritation that pre-pandemic wouldn't have bothered me? If the answer is yes, before the pandemic, this wouldn't have bothered me, then I would say that our window of tolerance has reduced, right? Because before, that irritation, that annoying thing was in my window of tolerance. And so I wouldn't get as irritated. Now I'm getting pushed outside of my window of tolerance and I'm starting to get extra irritable, right? If we can think about, does my irritation level match the behavior that's happening? I think often about, right, like we all probably have had that coworker or a classmate, or a friend who, let's imagine, right, like they are just really loud with a specific thing. So maybe they're clicking their pen a lot, or they're chewing gum really loudly, or they like clear their throat often, right? And typically that thing we kind of just are able to like, oh yeah, it's annoying, but I can let it go, right? It's not that big a deal. If you're starting to notice that those types of things are really irking you to the point where you're like, I just can't handle this anymore. This is too much. Why are they so annoying? Right? Our reaction internally is much bigger than the behavior that's occurring, right? Than the stimuli. So I would say we're being pushed into hyper-arousal.
Okay.
Good question. As we continue into this hyper-aroused state, our behaviors and our emotions increase in intensity. So we become more irritable. We're more combative. We are more defiant. We have more opposition, right? That like, I really don't want to do that. And so I might go out of my way to intentionally not do it because I don't want to do it. Consequences be damned, right? Because I don't want to do it. It doesn't matter, right? You don't know what's best for me. I know what's best for me. And I hear and see this a lot with my clients. I see both children and adults, and many of the parents that I've been working with have recognized more of this behavior in their kids. And I would say likewise, we as adults are having more of these behaviors as well. It takes two people to have an argument.
So because this type of environment with the pandemic is affecting everyone, we're having a lot of folks who are in this hyper-arousal state in the same household and are perhaps having a smaller tolerance of being able to engage with each other's behaviors. So let's say mom's irritable and child is irritable. And so we have that more combative behavior on top of folks not having an ability to regulate themselves well.
Yes. So there's more conflict, there's more arguing, there might be more yelling. And for both parties, right, coming from a space of, well, I feel completely justified, right? And again, that is a space of a fight, right? A fighting space to protect ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what this is about, is protecting ourselves in the way that our brain thinks is best.
Yes. And all of this is subconscious. This isn't like rationally, logically, I'm sitting here saying, well, I'm going to pick a fight with my boss today. No. As soon as we become dysregulated and our survival brain kicks on, our brain is taking in all the information from our surroundings and determining what is the best course of action to allow us to survive.
Right. Because when we're in that stressful environment, as you spoke to earlier, our brains shut off to our most basic instincts, right? So we're not even able to use the functions of our brain that help us with like reasoning or logic, right? All of that shut off.
Correct. Yes. And that's why it's important for us to be able to develop skills to help recognize, one, when our survival brain is turned on, and two, utilize skills to help turn back on our reasoning brain, our problem solving brain, our critical thinking brain, so that we can de-escalate, start to regulate our emotions to get back into our window of tolerance.
Okay.
I think about this a lot if we think about our brain biologically and how it has evolved, right? Humans are animals. We're just we're very intelligent, right? The frontal cortex of our brain, our reasoning brain, has really developed more than, let's say, a cat or a dog. But at the core, all animals have this survival brain being able to be activated. And so if we think back in time, our stressor the thing that was causing our fight flight might be, I'm running from a lion. Okay, well, it's very clear if I run from the lion and I get free, or a group of us come and we attack the lion and we fight and we are free from the lion, right? Victory. It's very clear in our brain that there's a resolution to that stressor.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're able to engage our survival brain, have a clear resolution, and then our parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us self-soothe and
Mm-hmm.
self-regulate, turns on and is able to bring us back down. Now, in modern society, our lions are not as clear. It is the deadline. Oh, well, I don't have a clear resolution to that because this is an ongoing project that I need to do at work. And so the constant pressure and expectation that this needs to get accomplished is my lion. But there is no clear resolution. And so I might constantly find myself in a suspended state of survival.
Interesting.
Yes.
So the more that we think of ourselves like animals as such, the more we're able to conceptualize that these alarms that we have going on in our body are things that are centuries old, in fact, farther along, right? And we are not communicating with both our brain and our body in such a way that's able to help our nervous system, our body, get back to a homeostasis.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The first step really is just being aware. So that ideally we don't get to this huge explosion, this last space of hyper-arousal where we may be very aggressive towards self or others. So that can be manifested in doing really risky behaviors. That could be increased substance use. That could be self-harm, suicidal ideation, or right again towards others. So verbal, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. All of these things are ultimately in hyper-arousal a space of trying to obtain control because we feel like we've lost it. And when we're in control, we feel safe.
What is the other end then? So if this is the hyper-arousal, what is the hypo-arousal?
Yes. All right. So let us go back down as these erase nice and slow. All right. So we go back down to the other side. So in our spectrum, oftentimes people will jump from the top cloud, our kind of angry, anxious cloud up at the top, plummet down into our cloud down here at the bottom, which, Ezra, you were so right. It's called hypo-arousal. And in hypo-arousal, we are experiencing kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. So freeze or fawn. Now, a lot of people are familiar with freeze, which is kind of like shutting down, but not a lot of people are familiar with fawn. And so fawning is a behavioral response, again, coming from survival, that is manifested with behaviors of overly accommodating, overly agreeable, to avoid conflict.
Is it right? The people-pleasing behaviors?
People-pleasing behaviors, yes, yep. If I agree and I do what these people want and I just say yes, yes, yes to everything, there won't be a fight and I won't have to deal with it, even if that means I'm working myself really, really hard. So in hypo-arousal, again, we have kind of those three kind of levels. In an alert space, we might be checked out, right? We're not really paying attention. We might not remember what people are telling us day to day. We're kind of starting to zone out, kind of retreating into our minds. We might utilize things to avoid our feelings or our stressors. So this can be things like social media, television, overly focused on other people's problems so that I don't have to deal with my own problems. Right. This could be kind of like we also talked about on the opposite scale in hyper-arousal. Substance use can be in here for avoidance. Anything that we're doing to not feel or deal with our stressors, you can plug into that kind of category. As we continue to go along, again, we're shutting down. We might be not responsive. We might start to withdraw, really isolating ourselves, not engaging with other people. Or again, in a fawn space, we might be more compliant, more agreeable, almost robotically so. We're not really expressing our own thoughts and opinions, kind of just agreeing with whatever is going on around us. And in a very intense space for hypoarousal, we may experience fainting, our body quite literally shutting down, kind of like playing possum, right? Going to sleep. And dissociation. Now, dissociation, I feel like, is a buzzword presently in social media and a whole bunch of different things. I just want to give a disclaimer that honestly, everyone dissociates. I think it's an amazing ability that our brain does. And I'm going to kind of explain what dissociation is. Dissociation is kind of our brain's superpower to give us a break from things that are going on around us, a break from things that aren't new and novel. Right? If our brain is doing something over and over again and has an expected response, for instance, like I drive the same commute to work every day, my brain knows what I'm going to see, what I'm going to experience. And when we're in our window of tolerance, right, our brain is then able to shift onto kind of like autopilot, right? It doesn't take in, it's not hypervigilant like hyper-arousal. It doesn't take in non-essential information. So I am now able to drive home and I might get to my house or get to work and be like, wow, I don't even remember that drive. Mm-hmm. Golly, that's rough. Dissociation is very, very normal and it happens to everyone. Now in hypo-arousal, there are some more intense and extreme forms of dissociation. The only time I'd say that it starts to become more of an issue is if your brain, again, because it's a pattern-seeking machine, if it has developed and connected the pattern that when I feel anxious or overwhelmed or fill in blank, whatever bothersome feeling, I'm just going to check out. Right. And if this is happening without your knowledge, then it's starting to become a problem.
A triggering event leading to disassociation as a response.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. 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 And what you were speaking to earlier, our brains just take in so much information that is just a result of that function of being able to just turn off some aspects of it to not have to constantly pay attention to everything as we do.
Yes. Right. Which is, I mean, it's very, very normal. If our brain took in all of the information, all of the slight movements of people around us or new sounds, or like in the space that I'm in right now, I have an office clock. And I know that the clock is like ticking, right? Tick, 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 tick. But while I'm talking to you and I'm paying attention to other things, I do not notice the sound of that clock. My brain is still registering that sound, even though I am not noticing it. And that is okay, because it's non-essential information. My brain is designed to filter things out so that I can perform at my best.
You only notice that clock when you're doing paperwork.
Yes, right. When I don't want to do something, when I'm avoiding it, when I'm in hypo-arousal. Yes.
So now that we understand hypo, you say that we can also bounce back between the two of them.
Yes. So in my experience, and I'm going to utilize this balloon to kind of help explain. So in my experience, when we have been pushed outside of our window of tolerance, so we are dysregulated, many of us, our brain will first go to hyper-arousal. Now, that's not the case for everyone. Some people's brain goes more so down to hypo-arousal just because of, right, our brain ends up selecting where we go based on our input for survival. So it's not always the case, but most of the time people jump up to hyper-arousal, and that's a lot of stress chemicals in our brain. That's a lot of awareness that our brain is having to take in, right? Being aware of the slightest movement or the shift in tone or facial structure or body language, being aware, and just a lot of energy is being used. And our brain can't sustain it. So eventually, our brain will kind of shut down to be able to have a break.
Mm-hmm.
And that shutdown becomes hypo-arousal. And so now let's say we were hyper-aroused at work, or with our kids or with our friends, and we were really anxious or really upset about something. We were really aware that, oh my gosh, that person was so inconsiderate of all these other things that they were doing. And so when I get home, I find myself being exhausted, where I just don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to sit down and watch TV. I don't even want to think about all that drama at work or all the things that I have to do. I have shifted into hypo-arousal. Now, in hypo-arousal, sometimes people will get so shut down that they don't feel any feelings. They feel numb. They feel nothing, which our body doesn't like that. Our brain and our body, we are designed to feel. So many parts of our brain are designed to take in information from our senses, right? We have visual information, auditory information. All of our brain, really, it's in various areas of our brain are designed to take in information. And so it's very uncomfortable for our brain and our body not to feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually, people may engage in risky things or socialize with people who are a little bit more dangerous, or they are, maybe we all have some of those friends or family members that are more hyper aroused all of the time, right? They're just a little bit more on edge, more irritable, or they have more drama going on in their life. And so when we engage more with that, or we go back to work, right, and we shift back into a hyper aroused state, we are then bouncing back and forth in our balloon between our clouds with very little time, if any, in the window of tolerance within our sun.
So then what recommendations or advice would you give to folks who are perhaps feeling this hyper-arousal and this hypo-arousal at this moment in time?
Yeah. So first is to recognize, can you relate to either of those clouds? If the answer is yes, okay, what cloud are you in most often? Are we hyper-aroused? And we might have more anxiety, or we have really intense depression can be up there as well. Anger, irritability, short-tempered, right? Where things are just, we're taking in a lot of information.
Yeah.
If we're in that space, something that we need to do to help get down back into our window is to exercise, right? Get rid of that energy. Our emotions are energy. And so we need to be able to move, right? Think about the survival brain that's being activated up there. It's fight or flight. And so in flight, for instance, in a conversation with someone at home or at work, it might look like avoidant behavior as well. It might look like, I just can't, right? Like anything to get away from the conversation, anything to do something. As long as you have energy and you're feeling that space of like, my heart's beating fast, my hands are really sweaty, like I just need to go, this may be hyper-arousal. And so what we need to do is allow our body to work out or get rid of all of those chemicals that are being produced in the survival brain.
Mm.
And we can do that by walking. We can do that by doing yoga, dancing. We can do that really any kind of movement that is pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
Any activity you enjoy doing.
As a therapist who is working in this tumultuous field right now, what are you hoping to see as a collective response to the trauma that folks are experiencing?
I'm really hoping that people start to notice more the value in mental health. And I have seen that so far in my practice. People who may have been able to function well enough, right, before the pandemic, right? I was able to like mask it and like work my way through. I was good enough. It wasn't too bad. When in actuality, they probably should have been seeing a therapist before the pandemic to work through that. Right? We don't have to suffer. We don't, if our thoughts are, oh, well, it's not that bad, right? Like I'm okay, it's well enough, right? Okay, well, you could be feeling so much better.
Right.
You don't have to feel just okay.
Mm.
And so with the pandemic and a lot of people being shifted out of their window of tolerance, more and more people are noticing, at least the people that I've been seeing, are recognizing more now. Oh gosh, I really do need to see someone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Is there anything that we haven't discussed today that you would like to add on to this conversation?
Yes. So hyper-arousal going down is exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hypo-arousal, freezing and people-pleasing, we need to be able to get back up. It's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are one of those individuals, and I will call myself out, I am one of those individuals, is that we oftentimes, when we retreat inwardly, we are escaping into our mind, right? We've created a world, or we're escaping into something else, video games, TV, whatever that thing that we're using to avoid, to shut down,
Right.
so we don't feel sleep. Taking a grand nap, right? I'm feeling really bothered and overwhelmed. I'm going to take a nap. We are avoiding. We are avoiding our feeling. So when we are noticing those things, what we need to do is help get ourselves back into our body, reconnect. So I would encourage you to do grounding skills, right? Drinking a cold glass of water and really noticing, right? What does it feel like, the cold glass on my hand? Is the perspiring condensation, right? Is it dripping down my arm? Can I feel that?
Mm-hmm.
When I take a drink, how far can I feel the cold go inside my body? Really notice that. Wow, taking deep breaths. Whew.
Noticing sensations, becoming more present, grounding yourself, centering yourself if at all possible.
Definitely. It'll bring you back up into your window of tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you're there, we have to do some work around what is that thing that's overwhelming in both cases, right? We need to actually deal with it and manage it. We can't avoid it, because then we'll just go back, right? We'll keep ping-ponging back and forward.
Right. Well, dang. Leslie, I really appreciate you sharing this information here today.
Yes, I'm happy to help.
Well, I think that you're just the bee's knees. Glad to have you here, and take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you. You as well.
The next segment of this video includes reflection questions. Go ahead and pause the video here to get these questions off the screen. I invite you to take a moment to get into a position that feels suitable. To rest, to get comfortable, to feel supported, to feel present. Perhaps that's lying down or sitting in a cross-legged position or putting your feet on the ground. Whatever feels most comfortable for you. When you feel ready, I want you to notice your breath. Become aware of the breath on the inhale and the exhale. If your eyes are open, I invite you to feel comfortable closing them or letting your gaze rest gently forward. Feel free to limit your distractions and turn your attention inward. Just breathing. Let your breath be what it is without changing it too drastically. There is not a right or a wrong way to breathe. Rest, knowing that your way is enough. I welcome you to observe the rise and fall of your chest. With each inhale and exhale, feeling your lungs expanding and contracting. With each breath, finding yourself relaxing more deeply. When you're ready, bring your awareness to your head. Take a moment to become aware of the sensations in your face. Allow the muscles in your jaw to slack, releasing the tension there that you might have been holding. Let your face be soft, relaxing the muscles around your eyes and your mouth, breathing in, breathing out. Let your awareness travel down your neck, lengthening the neck, and pause here to notice how you feel. You may want to extend the chin or begin to raise your head. Observe the sensations there and allow your shoulders to drop. If you're lying down, let your shoulders rest heavy on the floor beneath you. As we continue moving our awareness down the body, it's okay if your mind has wandered. Gently bring your focus back. Just notice without judgment. Sometimes being in our bodies and being present in our bodies is difficult. If you notice any discomfort, pain, or stiffness, let your awareness of that pass with no judgment. Just simply notice it. Observe how all sensations rise and fall, shift and change, moment to moment. Notice how no sensation is permanent. Just observe and allow the sensations to be moment to moment, just as they are. And you're breathing. You're doing excellent. Perhaps you don't feel anything at all in your body. That's okay too. Just allow yourself to feel the sensation of not feeling anything. Notice how no sensation is also not permanent. Just observe and allow the sensation to be moment to moment. Bring your awareness now to your sternum. On an inhale, feel the expansion of your chest as your lungs take in air. Observe the exhale now, how your chest deflates, making space once again for this life-giving cycle. Notice how you are relaxing more deeply with each rise and fall of your chest. Follow your awareness down the length of your spine, where you arrive to your lower back. Notice what is present there. Perhaps your back is resting gently against the floor, or that you're reclining into the cushion of your seat. Any sensation of contact or lack of sensation. Become aware of all sides of your belly. The front as it expands on the breath and contracts on the out breath. Release any tension in your abdomen and let your stomach soften as you find yourself just breathing. Observe how your belly, rib cage, back, all experiences of sensation are in movement to accommodate the breath. If you feel any tightness or tension, allow your breath to travel there and breathe into those spaces. Continue with your awareness, traveling down to your body, to the tops of your thighs. Perhaps, if you're seated, you feel the gentle stretch of resting cross-legged on the ground. Or, if you're lying down, feel your awareness move from the tops of your thighs to the contact of surface beneath you. Invite your legs, calves, and feet to soften or be at rest. Perhaps you can wiggle your toes or let your attention feel the sensations of your body as you are resting and breathing. And finally, let your attention expand out to include the entire body as a whole. Bring your awareness from the tip of your head to the soles of your feet. You are a sensation. Feel the gentle rhythm of your breath as it moves through the body. There is nowhere else you need to be than in this moment. As you come to the end of this practice, take a full, deep breath. And I invite you to open your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. Return your attention to the present moment as you become more alert and awake. Consider setting an intention after spending time and the awareness of your body. One thing we can do after this space is to express gratitude. After this year, there are many things our bodies did and still do for us. Perhaps in the past year, your body fought off infection, healed a bruise, kept working despite pain, rewarded you with the sight of a sunset, rewarded you with the sensation of a lover's touch, created another human being, gave you the sound of loved one's laughter, rejuvenated itself during sleep, gave you sexual pleasure, defended you from an attack, learned a new physical skill, stayed awake so you could drive home safely, or expressed a strong emotion. If you feel comfortable doing so, perhaps express gratitude for all the ways your body has done things for you within the past year. Thank you everyone for coming out and tuning into this video. If you find that you need it in the future again, feel free to return here to the guided questions, the meditation, or the presentation on the window of tolerance. Send this to anyone who you think would be in need of time intentionally with their mental health or grieving our lives pre-pandemic. I appreciate you. Glad that you're here. And I hope that you take care and be well.